I grew up as an athlete. I never stopped being an athlete. And when you're an athlete, you learn preparation because 90% is preparation and 10% is performance. I'm talking about the 10% that you compete. I played basketball, I ran track, and then martial arts. I'm addicted to practice. I love to practice. So free throws, shooting baskets for 4 hours a day, 5 hours a day. That's the way I became good at basketball. I wasn't natural. I prepared, and then I played defense. You have to get in the ring at a certain point and fight, and that's terrifying no matter what. Even if you're prepared, because they can always put you against somebody much more advanced, younger, stronger, heavier. So there's always somebody better than you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to From Crisis to Justice. I am your host, Parag Amin, and I am joined by my special guest, Jorge Olson. Jorge is a California-based entrepreneur, syndicated media producer, and best-selling author who has launched and scaled multiple eight-figure businesses, often from the ground up. He wrote the book, Build Your Beverage Empire and Marketing Karma, along with a number of fiction and nonfiction books. He, in fact, has published 15 books. And Jorge specializes in helping entrepreneurs turn personal branding, storytelling, and omni-channel marketing into unstoppable growth engines, especially when navigating risk, regulation, or reinvention. He's taken 5 companies public and raised over $100 million. Jorge, thank you so much for being on today.
You're very welcome.
All right. So before we started recording, you and I were talking, and you were telling me a little bit about your interesting background, including the fact that you, in fact, despite all these major financial accomplishments, taking 5 companies public, you didn't have any kind of financial background. And in fact, it sounds like maybe you grew up in an artistic family more than a business family. Is that right? And can you tell us a little bit about that journey?
Sure, and it even goes further than that. I majored in art, in liberal arts and sciences. I did go into business, and when I saw that they weren't teaching entrepreneurship, it was more how to be an employee, I changed it to art because I was more interested in art anyway. I was just doing business so that I could go into the business world. And in my house, we didn't have running water or electricity, but we had over 10,000 books in my house. They were stacked all over the house. In every corner, you had towers of books. My mom is a speed reader, and she finished college when I was 14, 15, and then became a teacher of philosophy and literature. So my love for books grew from there, from having so many books, and started picking up mythology at first, and then astronomy, and then other stories. That was the education I had. It was how to be a good person, and art, philosophy, and everything that goes around that. Appreciation of beauty, logic, the human behavior, influence. As a matter of fact, when I realized, because I studied influence since I was 12, later I realized that if you put that influence towards the marketplace, they call it marketing. And then I was a VP of marketing like that, like super fast. When I realized I'd been studying marketing, another type of marketing, but marketing nonetheless, since I was 12. So that was the education I had. We never talked about money. We never talked about finances. I knew we didn't have a lot of money, of course, and I knew we lived day to day, right? Go buy whatever we were going to eat. I would have to go buy it to the store every day, right? They would send me walking, go get this, go get that. And I walked to get the food. So that was my education in finance. It was work. My mom worked. My grandma, who lived with us as well, sold door to door businesses, business cards, and other printed material. So that was my world.
Wow. And so how and when did you decide that you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
I wanted to be a poet and a missionary. And I was a missionary since I was 15 years old. So I did become a missionary, and I wanted to go to the mountains and forget about civilization until I realized how poor we really were. And then I said, I'm the man of the family. I need to be a CEO. That was my my logic as a kid or as a teen. It was, well, I need to start by bringing running water into my house and electricity. This was in Tijuana in Mexico. In order to accomplish this, you have to flip the bill for the infrastructure. And as you can imagine, back then, a long time ago, each post was $1,000 to bring electricity. In Mexico right now, minimum wage is $50 a week. So I said, I'm not gonna make it. How am I gonna uh, how am I gonna save $10,000, $20,000 with a $50 salary? So I said, well, I'll be the CEO. Done. So I thought I would be the CEO of this manufacturing company because Tijuana has all of these manufacturing companies from all over the world: Black and Decker, Toyota, Samsung, Bose. They're all there. So I thought, well, that's my path. Later on, I discovered I was an American citizen because I didn't know. That's where I get the Olson via um, the Vikings through Minneapolis to Tijuana. If you can imagine, that's quite a journey from my grandparents. So I decided to come to school into the U.S. Cross the border every day, 4 hours each way to get to school. A lot of reading, one book a day I would read, one nonfiction book a day, because novels is another story, right? Like 1,000-page novels, I couldn't do one a day, but 200 to 300 pages, it's doable. A lot of audio. Even back then, we had book on tapes instead of, we didn't call them audiobooks, we called them books on tape. So I had my Walkman on the bus and walking. So I decided I was going to be an executive. That was my goal in life, to be an executive, vice president, or CEO, in order to, my life dream, to have my grandma and my mom stop working and put water, electricity, sewage, the whole 9 yards. So that was my financial goal in life, and go to Europe. That was my other goal. So I had those two big goals. So I set my mind into being an employee, and then quickly, I thought quickly because I'm a child, quickly being an executive.
Okay. And so one of the things you pursued is that path towards becoming a CEO of somebody else's company, and
Yeah,
eventually going on to well, why don't you tell the story? So you
sure.
worked your way up to the executive position, right?
Yeah, and it's very difficult to do it without mentors, because remember, I was a kid from Tijuana with no experience, no connections. So I didn't have somebody to mentor me or somebody to bring me into a company and say, "Oh, I'm going to fast track you to investment banker," or something like that. I didn't have any of that. As a matter of fact, I couldn't get a job after college. Like nothing. Not even a part-time job that I wanted. So I started teaching languages, and part-time, because they would only give me part-time work, and I made enough. I had a car now, and I made enough to pay the gas to come back the next day to work. So I was just going around in circles. However, I was teaching languages to executives from other countries that came to San Diego to play golf and kind of learn another language, because really they were on vacation. And one of the things that I did get also from my family was, and this is very normal and common in Mexico, where you open your arms and you accept everybody and you host them. So my the people that I taught were no different, and I took them out and about the city. I even took them down to Tijuana to eat Mexican food and have a good time, and of course, all over San Diego. So I befriended a lot of these executives, and they were top notch. I'm talking about the president of Deloitte, for example, came from France, and I was his teacher. Like top level executives from Fortune companies. One of them hired me, and it's as simple as that. One of them hired me, a German fella, and he said, "You want to come to Germany and work?" I said, "Duh." So I I found my first job out of college. My first real professional job was a software consultant in Western Europe, not only Germany, but Germany, France, Holland, Spain was my territory. So that was my introduction into the business world. I was still studying like crazy, reading like crazy, and soon after, I was the CEO of US operations, or North American operations, Mexico, US, and Canada, for this ERP software company. That was the way I got into the business world. My first paycheck, I called home and said, "Retire. Mom, grandma, retire." I sent half of my paycheck home. And with that money, all of the things that I told you, we were able, even washer, dryer, cable, I went all out, right? And that was my dream, and I achieved that at 26. At at 29, I was at a different job, executive in a software company, and there's a lot of travel involved because I was selling, visiting manufacturers and other accounts to sell them. I was VP of business development. And I said, "Why am I working so hard if all of my dreams came true already?" Oh, remember I told you I one of my dreams was to go to Europe. Well, I lived in Europe for a year. I
Right.
had a car, so I got to travel on their dime. So that was amazing. So I said, "I'm done with my dreams and my goals and everything. I'm done. I everything that I wanted, that I ever wanted, I got. I had an apartment in Coronado, then an apartment in La Jolla, paid by the company. These are two of the most expensive places in the entire country. New car, more than a month of vacation, paid trips to Europe, the whole thing. However, I said, what was my goal? I wanted to be a missionary and I wanted to be a poet. By now, it was evolved into a writer, more than a poet, not more than a poet, a writer, because I wanted to write nonfiction books, at least at that time. Now I want to write fiction. And I said, I need to get my time back. And I studied more, and I said, the only way I can maintain this type of income without working 12 hours a day is by being an entrepreneur. Sure, you can work 12 hours, 14 hours, and I've done that also in the past, but that wasn't my goal. My goal was to maintain the same salary that I had by working part time, not 40 hours and not 60 hours, and then having time to write and having time to travel. So I bought a company because I didn't know how to start a company, even though I was 30. I bought my first company, and that's the way I started. It was wholesale distribution, my entry into the business world.
Did you know anything about wholesale distribution when you bought this company?
I knew nothing about wholesale distribution. I did have a lot of best practices that I brought from my days as a software consultant, because I would install software in manufacturing companies and they had some sales and wholesale distribution. So the software integrated solutions. So I knew it from a back end. I knew it from ordering, receiving, entering into inventory, selling it, depleting inventory, calculating gross margins, and the finance side I knew as well. By now, I already launched my previous job, my last job. I helped them get funding, so I knew a little bit about venture capital, and I knew a lot about how to prepare financials, business plans, and that side. And I taught myself how to do that. It was basically Excel and some business writing, which I started writing with my first job. I learned that if you write articles, you position yourself as an expert. And the reason I was able to advance quickly was because I positioned myself as an expert. So I kept doing that and I haven't stopped. So I positioned myself as a wholesale distribution expert. And I'm a big believer in mentors. The gentleman Christian that took me to Europe became my mentor and taught me how to be an executive. The person who sold me the business became my mentor and taught me wholesale distribution, then became an investor. He invested $1 million and became my partner. So mentor first, he sold me the business, then mentor partner. By the time he sold me the business, he had 30 years experience in wholesale distribution that he delivered to me in about 18 months, all day, every day together. All day, every day, travel to trade shows, in the car, importing. I developed over 1,000 consumer goods at that time while working with him.
That's incredible. So what's interesting is you hit on two very important points. One, when it comes to entrepreneurship, the importance of learning to figure things out, learning to break things down to their essence, to their most important points, because otherwise you can spend crazy, inordinate amounts of time just trying to figure out a lot of details that will just lead to confusion rather than results. So the first thing is your ability to boil it down to the essence, the basic facts, the most important factors. And two, the importance of mentorship and having the right guidance, having the right people in your corner to help you ascend to the next level. So let's break those down and take them one at a time. First, what would you well, one, do you agree with that? And two, and it's okay if you don't, by the way. So one, do you agree with that? And two, in terms of the way you look at something so that you break it down into its core essence, how do you go about doing that? What's your approach?
Okay. I believe in what you said. I agree with it as well. And I learned that lesson when I was 16 years old. I went to a school where everybody was smarter than me, very, very smart. Everybody was very, very smart. Now they're deans in universities, they work for NASA, like really smart. And I thought, okay, it's not going to be IQ because these guys are much smarter. So it's not going to be IQ. I'm not going to make it with my IQ. I need something else. And I said, I'm gonna my superpower will be being able to read and learn and apply. I said, that's going to be my superpower. Instead of just making mistakes, I will learn from other people's mistakes, mentor, books, courses, all of these things that I was just eating every day, eating, drinking knowledge. And my reasoning was, first of all, I needed to learn how to learn. Second, I needed to learn and apply. Luckily, because I was in Germany and the Germans have a saying, learning by doing, I got to do a lot of doing and a lot of application. So that was the first step, learning to learn and then learning to apply knowledge without making the mistake yourself. So that was a big thing. So when a mentor that did it for 30 years and told me, don't do this, don't do this, do it like this, do it like that, I was able to do it exactly that way and avoid all of these costly mistakes and learn faster than normal, let's say. So yes, that was a big thing. And I still use the same techniques to this day of application in whatever I'm doing. I taught martial arts. I just stopped, but I taught martial arts for some time. And I was able to move through the system quickly because I had a mentor. I was able to learn and apply. So same thing. Then when I taught, I was teaching how to learn, not just how to learn martial arts, so that the students can also get into the mindset of of learning whatever it is. In this case, martial arts. It can be business, it can be finance, entrepreneurship, literature, or writing books. Right, that took a long time for me, especially since I write in English and it's my second language. That took a long time. I couldn't write anything when I started, just Spanish. So that transition also a lot of studying, a lot of reading and learning from editors, for example. Those were my mentors in that process. I even hired private mentors to teach me how to write and edit. That were same people who write and edit for Penguin Random House and this be and the big boys. I got them to mentor me so that I could accelerate my writing. So that's how I apply it. That's how I go about it with application, learning and application.
So what do you think is the best framework for learning?
It's different for everybody. It's how you learned as a child with what your genes already have. I'm a big auditory learner, and the way I explain it, because I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and the way I explain it to a lot of people, especially the people who do not like audiobooks, is I explain it this way: for the majority of humanity, we couldn't read. If you look at when we started reading as a planet, not in the US, not in your state or your city, but as a planet. That includes China, India, Africa. It's only been 50 years since the majority of the population knows how to read. How about before? How about 240,000 years? No reading. So, how did we learn? Well, when we developed language, we learned by stories. Before, probably pointing, grunting, and noises and pointing, right? So, a lot of through the ear. But once we started developing our ear and our vocal cords and communicating them, it's been stories, it's been auditory. So, we have an advantage because we can learn from the ear even before we're born. Stanford did a study to identify that children, when they're born, they already cry in an accent. So they already have an accent when they're born. They also identify sounds, ambient sounds, the parents or whoever's speaking. If there's a dog barking, they did an experiment. If there's a dog barking in the house before they're born, the dog barks when the child is born and the child doesn't cry. If they introduce a dog, they cry. And what they think, it's he knows it's a dog and it's part of the family, so the noise doesn't bother them. They can sleep through. So for me, it's auditory. I listen to a lot of audiobooks and I learned how to do something while I'm learning. It started, as I said, because I needed to walk, take the bus, cross the border in order to get to school with my headphones, with my Walkman. And now I can drive, but I can do things around the house and listen to audiobooks. I can have conversations while I'm listening to audiobooks. And that was my one of my secrets, that I was able to go through more information faster than anybody else. And because I was very attuned to my ear, I was able to learn that information when I heard only once. And I think that was a big way for me. Again, everybody's different, but that was the way I learned. And now it's come to apply it. One of the things that I think is very important when it's time to apply it is forget about failure. I in Mexico, you don't get an F. It's a number system. So if you get a 5, you fail. In my school, if you get a 6, which is a D, you would fail, and you had to get a B to stay in the school. So it was a difficult school. But I never heard failure as a grade until I migrated to the U.S. And I was taken aback that you would tell a kid that he failed. Even though I was a young adult, how can you tell kids they failed? This is out of the question. I was indignant to the fact that you could fail somebody, like, especially in business. You don't fail in business. You just become smarter. You fail forward, right? You have to fall forward and then be able to learn from it and keep going. So that's the second thing. Forget about failure and get rid of the fear for of failure. You can keep the fear of not being the best. I think that helps you a little bit. But fear of failure in anything, I think we should get rid of that. In sports, in speaking, right? A lot of people are afraid of speaking, in pursuing arts, or in pursuing business. You have to remove the failure from the equation.
It's an interesting point because I agree with you to a certain extent and I disagree with you to a certain extent, depending on the context. And here's what I mean. Here's what I think you're saying, which I agree with, which is regarding failure, to the extent that the fear of failure prevents you from taking action, then I think you're absolutely right. that one has to take action to be able to move forward. One has to take action to be able to succeed. I think that there's an aspect of the fear of failure that, at least for me, I found to be very positive, which is the aspect of preparation, the act of preparing. So it's the other side of exactly what you're talking about, the actions that need to be taken, and why one would take the action versus not take the action. And fortunately, I think we've seen a number of people who will go in. Confidence is one thing, which I think is very important, and I think it's good. And confidence gives you the willingness, the courage, many times, to take the action that needs to be taken. But unfortunately, sometimes what can happen is confidence can turn into arrogance. And for me, the difference between confidence and arrogance is the lack of preparation. Somebody coming in and believing they're already ready when they haven't prepared to do the thing. So
Mm,
I'll give it back to you in terms of whether you agree or disagree with that. And what are your thoughts
yeah.
on how one goes about preparing? Like, for example, you went from CEO to making a decision that you wanted to have your own business, but it's a lifestyle business, a wholesale business that you learn from a mentor, and that would give you the flexibility to be able to pursue your other artistic passions. And so you prepared to be able to do that. Can you also talk a little bit about how you prepared to do that?
Sure. And I think it's important to note I grew up as an athlete and I never stopped being an athlete. And when you're an athlete, you learn preparation because 90% is preparation and 10% is performance. When you're competing, I'm talking about the 10% that you compete. I played basketball, I ran track, and then martial arts. I, I I'm addicted to practice. I love to practice. So free throws, shooting baskets for 4 hours a day, 5 hours a day. That's the way I became good at basketball. I wasn't natural. I prepared, and then I played defense to make it to varsity my first year. That's the way I approached track and basketball. Martial arts, same thing. You have to get in the ring at a certain point and fight, and that's terrifying no matter what. It's terrifying. However, even if you're prepared, because they can always put you against somebody much more advanced, younger, stronger, heavier. So there's always somebody better than you. Preparation was the key for me in practice. Now, when it came to entrepreneurship, I took what we could call paid practice because I was an executive and I was running companies in my 20s. They weren't my companies, but I was running them. Right? I opened the U.S. subsidiary. I had to start it from scratch, pay payroll, get an accountant, uh, incorporate, do all of these things that you need to do also as an employee. So I did the practice part on somebody else's dime with mentorship and the whole shebang. And then I I studied a lot. I studied, I read, and then I practiced with doing financial projections, running numbers. Another thing that I did to practice is I went through maybe 40 businesses that I passed on, and I acted as an investment banker. So I wrote my own prompt, right? You're an investment banker looking at the financial and business model for all of these businesses, deciding which ones to purchase. So I learned how to read financials. I learned how to see if a company is healthy or not. So all of this was practice for me. By the time, so I didn't just like some people say being an entrepreneur is jumping from an airplane and learning how to build a parachute on the way. That wasn't me. I learned how to make a parachute and how to pack it before I got on the plane. And then when I was on the plane, I was very confident because I knew how to make money, I knew how to sell, and I knew marketing. And I found out in over since then 20 plus years that when you have a good financial background and you understand sales and marketing, you have to be a screw up to not be successful in business, especially with the sales and marketing background. So many of the businesses that I've founded or launched since then have been very strong on the branding, sales, and marketing. A lot of beverages, a lot of consumer goods, because I know the industry and I wrote the books on those industries. Another book I wrote is Wholesale MBA that I just published. Again, wholesale distribution, which is sales. That's the way I prepared.
I love that, and that is exactly what I think a lot of younger entrepreneurs especially need to hear, because we're so used to seeing the success stories on Instagram and those kinds of things, and the success stories like yourself, and hearing this whole idea without hearing the full background. So you hear or see the success, you see the tip of the iceberg, but you don't see what's underneath, all the aspects of the discipline, the hours that go into the preparation that people see, and they see the performance, they see the game, but they don't see the off season practices, the workouts,
Yes.
all the effort that goes
Yes.
into it. And in terms of finance and marketing and sales, I 100% agree with you. In terms of any business needs to have good, solid financial controls. It needs to have really good marketing and really good sales. And, in that regard, do you have any thoughts or tips on businesses in terms of what does make for great sales and marketing? And are you using any kind of AI, or would you recommend that they use any kind of AI to help them with it?
What a wonderful question, and I'm glad your audience get to hear those questions, because I fire people if they don't know how to use AI. And there's a disconnect right now with teachers also. They're sending me students that don't know AI because they don't let them use AI. And I'm telling those teachers, who are a lot of them my friends, don't send me kids that don't know AI. I can't use them, and I can't start teaching them from scratch. So yes, I use AI, and everybody that works for me needs to use AI at an advanced level, not dabble with it, but more than they need to know more than I know about AI. That's extremely important. And yes, I use it every day, and it's a part of my team. I have AI open also in art. I use it in art, in painting, in literature. Before my real person editor gets a manuscript, I programmed my own GPTs that are my editors, so they know my style, they can write in my style. I program my favorite editors so that it edits like my favorite editors. So I fed them all the books and all of the knowledge so that I get what I want, and then I send a much better manuscript to my editor, which then becomes my mentor, because now their job is to make me a better writer. In terms of marketing, my favorite marketing is direct response marketing. And let me tell you why. When you go to an MBA program, even business, but let's talk about an MBA program. Most of the case studies are from publicly traded companies. Even in your regular textbooks in management, finance, accounting, those studies are from companies that you can extract information. And it's much easier if they're public, because you can get real numbers, real data, press releases even from those companies. So now you have all of these younglings studying marketing from Coca-Cola. Let's pick on the beverage industry, because I that's one of my books. So now you have all of these entrepreneurs, and I've launched over 100 beverages. And I get a lot of entrepreneurs that call me, even students, because my book is used in 200 universities. So I get young kids calling me, "Oh, I'm reading your book in college. I need to do a paper and start a company. I plan on doing it like Dr. Pepper." And I go, "No, do it like Dr. Pepper did it when they were a startup. Do it like Coca-Cola did it when they were a startup, like Vitamin Water did it, like all of these companies did it when they were startups. Don't do it like they're doing it now, that they're worth billions of dollars in market cap, and they have Super Bowl commercials. Because when you start a beverage company or any company, that's not going to help you. You're going to think you can compete with them, and you can't. Not that way, at least. You have to compete in other ways, in blue oceans, in ways that nobody is envisioning. It's very difficult to put a beverage in a refrigerator in a 7-Eleven now. But it's really easy to sell it on TikTok, for example. And it's very difficult for Coca-Cola to sell it at TikTok, but you're not going to get their refrigerator in the store. I guarantee it. They own that refrigerator. So what direct response does to the entrepreneurial mind, it gives it a startup philosophy. Even if you're an accountant, lawyer, a service, I call that all of these professions artisans. If you're an artisan, like I'm a mentor, so I'm an artisan as well, and I like to use all of the direct response measurements, because in direct response, if you cannot measure the response, it's not marketing. You have to attribute a monetary value to every click, every view, every sign up, every lead, every prospect, every customer, and even when they leave, every referral, for example. In when I'm working with real estate agents, for example, mentoring real estate agents, I ask them, "What do you give people when they give you a referral?" Mind you, houses in San Diego where I live are $1 million, so ridiculous, but that's the price. So these guys are making $30,000 if they make 3%. So I tell them, what do they give them? Well, cookies. I tell them, I hope they're happy cookies, because they just made you $30,000. You should give them a trip to Disneyland or Hawaii. So spend $3,000. And they're like, that's ridiculous. Really? Is it? If you send somebody every year on vacation, I guarantee you they're going to send you one customer a year, because they'll be accustomed to that vacation. I would do it. I would send uh, one one for sure customer a year to a real estate agent if I would get a trip a year. And I think most people would as well, instead of getting brownies or cookies. So that's an example. Same if you do Google ads or Meta ads, you have to see it as a formula. What's the cost of acquisition of a customer? What's the lifetime value of that customer? As it relates to wholesale distribution, what's the cost of acquisition of a 7-Eleven in your neighborhood? And then what's the cost of acquisition of a customer? Whether you sell snacks or hats or sunglasses in the 7-Eleven, it's the same formula. Then how much does it cost you to keep that 7-Eleven and that customer? Right? Even if it's one customer that comes back every day to drink your drink or to buy sunglasses or a lighter or cigarettes or whatever they buy. And that's what I like about direct response. It makes it very easy to for entrepreneurs to learn marketing without, oh my God, branding. I'm not artistic. It's a little bit of magic with some fairy dust. No, it's numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, well, going back to a little bit of AI and how you might recommend entrepreneurs end up using it, you did touch
Yeah.
upon, there's the entry level and then there's the more advanced level. So can you describe what you mean by that, and can you give us a specific example? Like, what is an entry level or a bad type of prompt, and what is a
Okay.
better type of prompt?
Okay. I would say that if you're an entrepreneur, you should pay for GPT, the paid version, number one. The main reason is because you can create your own GPT. What that means is very simply that you train the AI as if it was a member of your business. What member you decide. You can have different members or you can have one member. For example, you might create one GPT that's a graphic designer. You might create another GPT who is a headline editor. So all they do is pick headlines for you. And what I did is I fed it the best headlines of all time, right? So copywriter, right? It's a headline writer or copywriter. It writes to sell. It writes copy that sells, not science fiction, fantasy. They write to sell. That's important. You might have another one that's a financial analyst. You might have another one which is your accountant. I even do one per project or per customer. I trained a GPT based on the business model, and I come up with the business model for that business first. So this is the way I would approach it. Number one, start with yourself as a person. Feed it everything about you, what you like, what you don't like, your strengths, your weaknesses. Tell it or have a conversation, right? Now you can put it on your phone, push a button, and you can be driving to work or to your office and train your GPT by having a conversation. And you would just tell it to interview you. You would tell it, I want to write a GPT who's going to be my publicist or my personal brand manager. Help me train it. That's your prompt, because what you really want is for it to interview you. Once it interviews you, all of that copy, by the way, this might be 10,000 words. So it might be a lot. You would feed that interview as your prompt. So that big conversation, almost a book, we talk at about 8,000 words per hour. So if it's a 30-minute drive to your office and 30 minutes back, guess what? You just trained an incredible model, like an incredible, almost a book, right? If you do that 2 days, it's an actual book that you just wrote with your interview, just by conversing, because it is smart, and it'll ask you, and you can tell it to ask you deep questions. So it'll get to know you. Now you have something to feed your first GPT or your first custom AI. You feed it that 10,000 words and you say, you're my publicist. This is the conversation I have with you. Learn from it, and you will help me with my business based on what you know about me. So now you have your own GPT trained on you. Personal branding is a big thing. When I started, it wasn't a big thing. Now, because you see all of these executives that you get to know, and they kind of live a reality show, a lot of these uh, software executives, uh, we're used to, we know they're a brand and it's important. Back in the day, people would hide behind logos and corporations. Even when LinkedIn started, I remember my friends wouldn't put their picture. Like for 10 years, they didn't put a picture, because how can I'm not going to share a picture online. Right now, if you don't have a picture on LinkedIn, you don't exist. You're not going to get hired, right? Nobody's going to trust you. When they Google you, they're going to say, why is Jorge hiding? So that changed a lot. So I would start with the personal branding. Then from there, I would do the same with your company. I would say, but to this train GPT, I wouldn't start from scratch. You say, I am the CEO with all of these weaknesses and strengths. I am the CEO of this business. This is the business model. Please help me write my sales letter, my email autoresponders, my ads, my brochure, my about me page, my press releases, whatever you write and do, my branding, my logo. It would do a logo for you based on your favorite colors, and maybe art styles. If you're into art, you can tell it what art styles you like, and then it'll start doing all of this for your business. Once you have this big document for your business, then you do the same thing. You start a new GPT and you feed it all of this information that your first GPT gave you. So now you have a personal branding GPT and your business GPT that will help you create LinkedIn posts, ads, press releases, job ads so you can attract talent. All of this you just trained. Same with art and branding. You need to know a little bit about art, or get somebody who knows a little bit about art. This is where being an art major and an art lover helps me, because I was a VP of marketing since I was 26, and I did all the creative for the companies that I've worked with. I've done creative for Snoop Dogg, for Rick Ross, for NFL players, NBA players. So I don't get a designer until my designer do it. The designer is my AI. Now it's AI, but back then it was my designer, and I would give my designer prompts as well as styles. Use these styles. Don't invent anything. Do exactly what I tell you. Because when I tell them, use your imagination and try to give me something, I never like it. So then you're the problem, right? It's not them, it's you. So you have to know what you want, and you have to know something about. Now I'm getting into branding for the branding side, not just direct response copy, but the, let's call it the visual aspect, because now you can do videos, you can clone yourself, you can do video ads, mini movies, all with AI, right? With the new release from Google, which is amazing. You can do 7-second videos, and then, or even with Sora, and then put them together to do a commercial. So you need to understand art. If you don't understand art, or you don't want to get into it, use the word vibe. For example, I want a 70s underground Russian metro vibe. I want a Pac-Man 70s, late 70s vibe. I want an 80s arcade in San Antonio vibe. And then the AI understands, or a manga, a Japanese manga vibe, right? If you're into that type, and then it'll say, I know what you mean. And it'll start throwing you things that then you can, oh yeah, I like this one. And then you say, reverse engineer it for me, reverse prompt it. Once you find a vibe that you like, you reverse prompted. Now you're an expert as prompting the art that you like. And now you can go ahead and brand yourself, your company, with this, with all of the same type of art. So that's the way I use AI currently.
I love that. That is so good. That is one of the best summaries and useful tactical descriptions of how somebody has successfully used AI in terms of marketing and branding that I've heard. So thank you for sharing that with the audience.
You're welcome.
So, Jorge, let me ask you this. If our listeners want to find out more about you, including how to work with you, how can they reach out to you or find you?
Sure. JorgeOlson.com, which is my name.com, JorgeOlson. And I have a free newsletter, which happens to be a webinar, because I brand myself through video more than anything. And I have free webinars that I go into, but that starts the conversation because you'll have my email. LinkedIn, if you can't wait and you want to talk to me immediately, go to LinkedIn. I'm a big user of LinkedIn. I'm a first adopter of LinkedIn. I have groups in excess of 100,000 members on LinkedIn. So I always answer my LinkedIn as, I treat it as text, as texting, my email. Now I like LinkedIn because I know who you are. If you go to my Twitter, you can hide, and I don't like that. I like to know about you as well. So LinkedIn is great if it's urgent, but if you want more information, if you want to get my vibe, go to jorgeolson.com, and then you'll get emails and videos from me.
Awesome. Love it. I hope you all learned as much as I did in terms of the vast breadth of knowledge from Jorge, the depth of knowledge from Jorge. So, Jorge, thank you again for sharing this wisdom and knowledge with me and the listeners.
You're so welcome.
And to everybody who joined in, I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. And if you want to hear more, including tactical tips to help you scale your business and avoid any crisis or get from crisis to justice, make sure you like and subscribe. Until next time, I'm your host, Parag Amin, and I'll see you then.